Well, hello, hello. It's good to see you again for the second week in a row. Although I must say I prefer to be there in person, speaking in person, but it's interesting to see you all from this perspective. So I'll pretend I'm standing right there. I found out something very interesting. Did you know that according to most studies, people's number one fear is public speaking? Well, the number two fear is death. So this means to the average person, if you go to a funeral, you're more likely to be more comfortable in the casket than if you were doing the eulogy or speaking. Just saying. Glad I'm comfortable standing there or being here. So it's May 1st. I am stunned how fast the year is going. I had to look up something for my son today on my phone, something we had talked about with a supplement that we liked. And when I went back to find our conversation in my text messaging, it was exactly a year ago. So I just am stunned how fast time is moving right now. But May is a good month. And so I always remember May 1st in Annapolis when I would visit my grandmother in Annapolis, Maryland. May 1st was the day to decorate your doors with flowers. So we'd walk through the streets of Annapolis with all the doors decorated, and it was beautiful. So we move into the May global theme from the Centers for Spiritual Living, and it is titled Holy, Holy Uprising. It's kind of an interesting phrase. It is holy, holy uprising. What a title. And how about that word uprising? It has so many meanings, and there are quite a few uprisings actually going on around the world for lots of different reasons. Not all of them are bad or for bad results, or negative is I guess the word. I have to say that because I was taught a very specific outline for the meaning of that word uprising. And some uprisings currently are actually for changing things for the better for humanity. And there are some that might not have a good reason behind them, but we're not going to focus on that today. So what is a holy uprising? Because of my internal definition, I keep my uprising really for my internal work. Otherwise, with my semantic interpretation of that word, if I'm uprising, I'm probably in somebody's face, and that may not be good for either of us. So I'm going to flip the word and call it rising up, which follows last week's message of stepping out and stepping up. Now, we're rising up into what is holy for ourselves and for the whole. We're rising up into love. We are rising up into an energy above the fray. And some of us are rising up to let the world know that we are part of a spiritual center that brings a message of creating a life that we love and loves us back in abundant ways. Yes? Yeah. From Emma Curtis Hopkins. If you have a clear idea of how sweet life, free and unburdened, must be, look to this science to bring you this life and declare very plainly that sweet, free life is your good. It will come streaming through you like the elixir vitae of the ancients. That's the elixir of life. Life is a journey of love, healing, and awakening, which brings me to today's title, which is This Adventure Called Life. From the science of mind, the divine plan is one of freedom. Bondage is not God ordained. Freedom is the birthright of every living soul. All instinctively feel this. The truth points to freedom under law. Thus, the inherent nature of man is forever seeking to express itself in terms of freedom. We do well to listen to this inner voice, for it tells us of a life wonderful in its scope, of a love beyond our fondest dreams, of a freedom which the soul craves. So we can equate adventure with freedom. So this adventure called life is perfect. The adventure is the path to finding the truth of who we are, our reason, our sole purpose for being here, healing our hearts, our emotional selves, experiencing events along the path as we grow. Forgiveness is there, and coming to the realization that there is a divine plan and we are part of it. Adventure is the positive term for it, and I'm sure there's many of us who have come a long way with our path, and maybe things didn't appear quite so positive, so we may have other terms for it. But we do well to listen to that inner voice to guide us along the way, that way of love, into love, abundance, and a freedom our soul craves. You know, most of our actions and behaviors are actually patterned after a set of unconscious meaning of words that were taught throughout our life by our family, social groups, by sight, and even by trauma. And how we interpret what we hear from others and our response is how we communicate on all levels. When I looked at this monthly theme, Holy, Holy Uprising, and here it is again, it is a holy, holy uprising. My first response was for my mind to go down that rabbit hole. Well, it was a holy, holy rabbit hole, which I mentioned a moment ago. And there's a lot going on in the world today that is about uprising. We interpret it as positive or negative depending on what we hold inside of ourselves, those interpretations. How does our mind interpret what we see and hear and understand about what's going on? Our teaching and principles of science of mind provide a platform for a clear intake and interpretation of stories, events, and how we communicate that with others. I think we're very lucky to have this philosophy and this teaching, which really guides us to do this. And when we take the moment to be in principle, to rise up above an event or an angry person engaging with us, we can provide the opportunity for a higher paradigm of consciousness to be present. And this can lead us into a calmer communication and time to interpret the events from that higher place, that mind of God, of love. And when that happens, there can always be the possibility of a different outcome than what might have transpired. I have 5 communication practices to share to help along the way with being in principle and rising up above the narrative of someone or something else. And we acknowledge this from a higher consciousness. So when we're engaged with others, we want to be present. Give your full attention to whoever you're speaking with. And to stay present, sometimes we have practices, maybe feel your body where you're sitting or standing. Feel the sensation in your hands and your feet. I used to read a lot of Stuart Wilde. He always suggested to run your fingers along the table when you really needed to be present with someone. Do you guys remember Stuart Wilde? Did you guys read his books? I love his stuff. A long time ago. The second thing is to listen completely. As you engage with others, try to listen with your whole heart. Make a mental note of important thoughts and questions and responses as they arrive, and then return your attention to hearing the other person. Always come from curiosity and from care. The quality of connection and understanding we create is vital. When our intentions are driven by an agenda, getting our way, needing to win, needing to be right, or making that point, we limit the possibilities for mutual understanding and a creative outcome together. Look for the question to understand their position. Where are they coming from? Years ago, Bob and I took a sales communication course, and it taught us to not really ask that question out loud, but to have an open-ended ending statement, something like, well, you must be saying that for a reason, and then be quiet. And that gives the other person the chance to really spill and talk about what they're saying. They may then really open up and go, yeah, well, blah, and then kind of give you the whole speech, the whole thing. So we listen with care and as we sit there with them in attention. The next thing is to try to focus on what matters. Are you judging what is being said? To create a clear quality of connection, focus on the underlying needs or the objectives. Ask yourself, what matters here? What matters about this topic? This helps us to get beyond any of the surface positions to the underlying values for both parties. And then we pause. Our habits of communication are deeply embedded, and responses may pop out of our mouths at lightning speed before we have a chance to think about what we're saying. So practice to pause before we talk and after and during while we speak, and consider how your response may be interpreted. All of these can help us in our communication and our interaction with others while we travel on that adventurous path and do our work. Ah, yes, that sound is better. Thank you. And how do we live a more meaningful life while we're on this path, this adventurous path? How about goal setting? Do we do that? Well, sometimes. Some people do goal setting daily. They do it for the week, for the year, and there's always that 5-year plan and the 10-year plan. I can't live that strictly that way anymore. I was always taught to be in business that you should do that for planning and for budgeting, create those goals all along the path, all along the way. But life has just been too fluid for me. In fact, I joined Toastmasters recently, and a lot of their language and their conversation is about setting goals and what do I want to achieve. And they have that agenda and that purpose. I get that. That's what it's for. But I like to answer the question in a very different way for me. I think goals can be more like road signs. As a science of mind person, I may set what will look like a goal, and then I end that thought process with the intention it is this or something better, because I don't know what my soul path is going to do down the road. And that's based on my experience over the past 20 years. It has felt like I've been on a roller coaster and yet being led to pretty good outcomes. I know what I want to accomplish and I want to claim it, but I also don't want to hold myself down if I have the opportunity for something new that I didn't think of before, because that's what's been shown to me over the past years. How can we be at that level? Well, at this level where I am, where we all are, how can we ever know everything about what's coming up ahead? But there is always that within that does know, right? So I make my desire, I may set it as a goal, but I always keep the intention and the knowing that it is this or something better. And I stay open. And what if we're really open? What if we just said yes to every opportunity, every holy and holy opportunity, knowing in the background of our thought that we're always led by that highest consciousness once we've given the go ahead? Adventure isn't exclusive to the adrenaline rush, like jumping down the zip line, which I have to admit, I love that stuff, or an African wildlife trek, and that can be an adrenaline rush also. There's an inner adventure, finding God within the self. And there are some of the processes that we go through. Well, some say it's like tripping without the acid. And breath work was like that for me. If you've ever done that intensive breath work, it can bring that on. I've had some experiences that have had that adrenaline rush. I like being in nature. And the human events that begin just with a silent communication in our spiritual practice that expands to a smile, a kindness that is expanded out to someone else, and learning and meeting new people, new places, new things. These are all a part of an adventure that begins and ends in consciousness. And every day we have the opportunity to find the divine out there in new ways. But how we see the adventure of life, the path we are on, and even our goals always begins within. Finding the truth of what we are, finding love within to share with others, kindness, and extending ourselves and extending to others always grows in all directions. And that becomes the guidance of our path, because we never know where that path is going to go. And this helps us have a meaningful life. These are the positive things that keep us on a path for a mindful and purposeful life. We are being not only in service to ourselves when we do this, but we are also in service to others. Do you remember last week when I described that ladder in our spiritual work, that as we grow, we become a magnet and an example for others around us? And for those that are coming up on the ladder, we stand on that rung of the ladder, and there are those that are coming up the ladder behind us in their spiritual work energetically, and those people that we are following, and we are all doing this together, and we are all on our path. And you know what else it does? It helps to create an adventure of life that we may not have thought of ahead of time. I could not have known ahead of time what my life was going to turn out to be in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years, as I was making goals or making plans. So I keep my goal setting fluid because I never know what's going to show up anymore as a result of that smile or that kindness I did. And even just saying yes to a simple invitation. I want to present to you something right now that is a meditation written in 1941 from the clinical lessons written for practitioner training back in California in one of the original centers. This particular meditation is so wonderful for claiming a goal or a plan for yourself in Science of Mind principle. So you can close your eyes and receive it in first person for yourself, or just listen as we go along. So take a breath. What is the divine plan for me? There is no stipulated plan which God has made, which I must live out through its vicissitudes and triumphs. The divine plan for me is my plan for myself. My claims are validated when and as I make them. My plan for myself is consistent and progressive right action and everything that right action includes. It is not necessary in human experience that I shall have highs and lows for the purpose, as some mistakenly say, of forming a contrast which will enable me to appreciate the opposite. Time cannot delay, nor man curtail, the consistent and progressive working out of the divine plan for me. There would be little progress if all individuals thought they could proceed no faster than the times. The universe in which I live is eternally good, eternally favorable to the development of man. All nature awaits on him. There are just as many opportunities, advantages, privileges for me today as there ever were and ever can be. The times are favorable for me right now. All the beauties of heaven and earth attend me, inspire me, sustain me, and my word accomplishes. God loves me with a love by comparison infinite beyond any love I can conceive. In a perfectly natural, unceasing way, the blessings of the Father come to me. It is the Father's good pleasure to eternally love me, guide and protect me, give me his strength and wisdom, his peace and his bounty. I find no cause to doubt, for I dwell constantly in faith upon the goodness within dwells me, animates me, and surrounds me. Because I keep my thought poised and full of faith, I know that everything is working out perfectly in my experience, and there is only cause for rejoicing. The good works of the Father he does for me as he first finds faith in me. Take a breath. Isn't that wonderful? I'll remind you that this was written in 1941, and some of the wording is different than we would use today, but it still works. Isaiah 26:2-3. Open the gates that the righteous people who keep faith and that the truth may enter in. Thou wilt keep me in perfect peace, for in thee we have trusted. As I read the sentence the first time, the line that is, God loves me with a love by comparison, infinite beyond any love I can conceive, it took me to an aha moment. It emphasized the love of God. And what I wrote in that moment, as God is love and I am made of God, God lives, moves, and has its being in me as me. I am love itself. To not love myself is to not love God. God loves me as the expression of itself. I am God loving itself as I love me and all others, because there is only one. And with this, it is God's good pleasure to give you, to give me, to give all of us the kingdom. All the things that we claim, the goals, the desires on our path, our adventure called life, including love, abundance, and freedom. So in conclusion, this week, as we go forward, investigate the ways you may hold yourself back from this adventure we call life. Yes, we can still set our goals, we can still do our to-do lists, but hopefully they're not too rigid and you don't punish yourself for not making the deadline. Can you leave space for something else to pop in that may be an adventure that you never thought of, that brings you something better and still accomplishes your goal or your idea? And is your adventure of life showing you love, abundance, and for the whole, for a great adventurous life? Let's go for it. And so it is.